Ma'am, you need to come with us. ICE Agent Marcus Brennan's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. 6 years with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. 3 formal complaints alleging racial profiling buried in his file. A track record his supervisors called aggressive but effective. Untouchable. I was born in Detroit. I'm a registered nurse. This is my hospital ID. Kendra Williams held up her laminated badge, her hand trembling in the early morning light. 34 years old. 3rd-generation American. 12-hour overnight shift in the emergency room just finished, her scrubs still bearing the faint stains of other people's emergencies. Her grandfather had served in Vietnam. Her father had worked at the Ford plant for 30 years. She had never been outside the United States except for one trip to Canada in college. We'll sort that out at the facility, Brennan said, pulling out handcuffs. Hands behind your back. What he did next would cost the federal government $14.8 million, destroy his career, and expose a pattern of racial profiling that had been hiding in plain sight for 6 years. Comment where you're listening from. Subscribe to channel. But here's what nobody knew about Kendra Williams. She wasn't supposed to make it this far. Born in Detroit's East Side in 1990, Kendra grew up in a neighborhood where emergency sirens were the soundtrack to childhood. Her mother worked 2 jobs, morning shift at a nursing home, evening shift cleaning office buildings downtown. Her father, Marcus Williams Sr., worked the assembly line at Ford until the plant closed when Kendra was 12. After that, he worked whatever he could find. Security, warehouse, anything to keep the lights on. Their apartment was small. 2 bedrooms for 5 people. Kendra, her younger brother Marcus Jr., their parents, and their grandmother who had dementia. Kendra shared a bed with her grandmother until she was 16, learning to wake up 3-4 times a night when Grandma got confused, thinking she needed to cook breakfast at 2 a.m. or get ready for a job she hadn't worked in 20 years. The schools in her neighborhood were failing. Teachers came and went. Textbooks were outdated. The science lab had equipment from the 1970s. College counseling meant a 15-minute meeting where an overworked advisor asked if you'd thought about community college. Most kids dropped out before senior year. The ones who stayed were just running out the clock. But here's what nobody knew. Kendra was brilliant. Not in the way people expected, not loud about it. She didn't raise her hand in class or compete for attention. But she remembered everything. Medical terms from when her grandmother's doctor explained dementia. Anatomy from the worn encyclopedia set her father bought at a garage sale. Pharmacology from reading her mother's nursing textbooks while her mother slept between shifts. By 15, Kendra could describe the pathophysiology of congestive heart failure, explain the mechanism of action for beta blockers, and calculate medication dosages in her head faster than most nurses. She knew because she was essentially her grandmother's unpaid home health aide. Tracking medications, monitoring symptoms, calling the doctor when something seemed wrong. Nobody at school knew, nobody asked. Her teachers saw a quiet black girl from the projects who turned in assignments on time and didn't cause problems. They didn't see someone who was teaching herself college-level anatomy and physiology. They didn't see someone who stayed up until 2 a.m. studying after taking care of her grandmother, then woke up at 6 a.m. to get to school. That was her first survival skill. Invisibility. Her second was resilience. When Kendra was 17, her father had a heart attack at work. Massive MI. He survived but couldn't work anymore. Disability payments didn't cover what he used to make. Her mother picked up a 3rd job on weekends. Kendra took a job at McDonald's after school, working until closing, then coming home to take care of her grandmother while her mother slept. She still maintained a 3.8 GPA, still read her mother's nursing textbooks, still dreamed about healthcare, about helping people, about being someone who made a difference. Wayne State University offered her a partial scholarship. Not enough. She took out loans, worked full-time while taking classes full-time, slept 4 hours a night. Her mother told her to quit, to get a real job, to stop chasing something impossible. But Kendra had watched her grandmother fade away, watched her father deteriorate, watched her mother work herself to exhaustion trying to hold everything together. She was going to be a nurse. She was going to help people. She was going to prove that kids from the East Side could become something. That was her third survival skill, determination that bordered on stubbornness. She graduated with her BSN in 2014, passed her NCLEX on the first try, got hired at Detroit Memorial Hospital in the emergency department. 6 years later, she was one of their best nurses. Fast, competent, calm under pressure. The kind of nurse who could run a code, comfort a grieving family, and train a new grad all in the same shift. She had made it. Against every odd. Against every statistic that said girls like her didn't become girls like this. And on March 12, 2024, at 7:18 a.m., walking to her car after saving 3 lives during her overnight shift, a federal agent who had never spoken to her before decided she looked illegal. This is when everything changed. The tip had come in that morning. Anonymous. A heavily accented voice claiming there were undocumented workers at Detroit Memorial Hospital using stolen identities. No names, no descriptions, no evidence, just vague accusations that should have been investigated before any action was taken. But Marcus Brennan didn't wait. He never waited. Let me tell you who Marcus Brennan really was. White, 42 years old, raised in Bloomfield Hills, one of Michigan's wealthiest suburbs. His father was a lawyer. His mother didn't work. He went to private school, played lacrosse, attended Michigan State on his parents' dime. He joined ICE in 2018, the same year the agency's detention practices were making national headlines. He believed in law and order. He believed in protecting borders. He believed his instincts were sharp, that years on the job had given him an eye for who belonged and who didn't. In reality, his instincts were biases dressed up as experience, assumptions rooted in prejudice rather than law. His track record proved it. 3 formal complaints alleging racial profiling, each one describing the same pattern, targeting individuals based on appearance rather than evidence. A Latina woman questioned outside a grocery store turned out to be a 4th-generation Texan. A Middle Eastern man, detained at the airport, was an Army veteran with a security clearance. An Asian family stopped in their own driveway because someone reported suspicious activity. They were unloading groceries. Each time, Brennan's supervisors defended him. Aggressive but effective. They praised his arrest numbers without questioning his methods. They ignored the complaints, buried them in bureaucracy, protected him because that's what the system did. And every time he got away with it, he got bolder. That morning, Brennan assembled his team. Agent Tyler Rodriguez, Agent Jennifer Chen, Agent David Mitchell. All wore body cameras, a policy implemented 2 years earlier after civil rights lawsuits. The cameras were supposed to protect everyone, create accountability, provide objective records. What Brennan didn't realize was that those cameras would become the evidence that destroyed him. They positioned themselves in the hospital parking lot at 7:07 a.m. Morning shift change, bright daylight, perfect conditions. They watched the exits, looking for anyone who fit the profile. When Kendra walked through the automatic doors at 7:18 a.m., Brennan saw exactly what he was looking for. Dark skin, tired expression, scrubs bearing the stains of a long shift. Something in his mind clicked. It didn't matter that she was walking out of a hospital where she clearly worked. It didn't matter that she was exhausted from saving lives. It didn't matter that nothing about her suggested she was undocumented. She was black. That was enough. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority meant to intimidate. "We need to speak with you." 4 body cameras activated simultaneously, 4 different angles capturing every moment in crystal-clear daylight. Every word, every gesture, every violation. Kendra stopped, her keys gripping so tight her knuckles went white. "Can I help you?" "We're with Immigration and Customs Enforcement," Brennan said, stepping closer. "We've received information about undocumented workers at this hospital. Can you provide identification and proof of citizenship?" Her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. She'd read the stories. She knew what happened to people, especially black people, who panicked around federal agents. "I'm an American citizen. I was born in Detroit. I work here as a nurse." She reached slowly for her purse, pulling out her hospital ID badge. The laminated card gleamed in the morning sun. Her photo, her name. "Kendra Williams, RN, Emergency Department." Impossible to miss. "This is my employee ID," she said, holding it up. "My driver's license is in my wallet." Brennan barely glanced at it. His camera recorded his dismissive gesture, his eyes moving away almost immediately. He had already decided. Everything else was just noise. "This could be fake," he said. "We're going to need you to come with us for verification." That was his first mistake. Verification of what? Kendra's voice stayed steady, but her hands trembled. "I just showed you my hospital ID. My driver's license has my birth date and address. What exactly are you accusing me of?" Brennan's jaw tightened. Resistance irritated him, especially from people he believed had no right to resist. "Ma'am, you need to come with us. We have reason to believe you're undocumented. If you're telling the truth, this will be cleared up quickly." Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. His camera wavered. He could sense something was wrong, but he said nothing. Challenging Brennan in the field meant risking his own position. "Reason to believe?" Kendra's voice rose. "What reason? I showed you my ID. I told you I was born here. What more do you want?" Brennan stepped closer, invading her space. "Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we can do this the hard way. Your choice." The threat hung in the air. 4 cameras recorded it, audio and video. Perfect quality. Kendra looked around the parking lot. Morning shift was arriving, cars pulling in, co-workers walking toward the entrance. Some glanced over with concern, slowing their pace to watch. But nobody intervened. Nobody stepped forward. They saw federal agents and a black woman in handcuffs to be, and they made calculations. Getting involved meant risk. Staying silent meant safety. That's how systems of oppression work. Not through monsters, but through ordinary people choosing not to see. "I'm cooperating," Kendra said, breathing carefully. "But you're violating my rights. You have no warrant, no probable cause. Nothing but an assumption based on how I look." Brennan's face flushed. "Don't make this about race. This is about immigration law." "Then show me the evidence," Kendra shot back, pointing at him. "Show me what gave you probable cause to stop me. Because right now, it looks like you saw a black woman in a parking lot and decided she must be illegal." That was his second mistake. Getting angry. Because anger made people careless. And 4 body cameras were watching him get careless. He pulled out handcuffs. The metallic click echoed across all 4 audio feeds. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Kendra's blood ran cold. "You're arresting me for what?" "Suspected immigration violation and failure to provide adequate documentation." Legal-sounding phrases, bureaucratic nonsense, masking the absence of any real justification. "This is insane," Kendra said, her voice shaking now. "I'm a nurse. I work here. I'm an American citizen. You can verify everything with 1 phone call." "We'll sort that out at the facility," Brennan replied coldly. "Hands behind your back." She knew the statistics. She knew what happened when black people resisted federal agents. She turned slowly, placing her hands behind her back. The cuffs snapped around her wrists, too tight, metal digging into skin, already leaving marks. "These are too tight," she said. "They're fine," Brennan dismissed, testing them with a sharp tug. Her body jerked forward. The walk to the ice van felt surreal. 4 cameras recorded from different angles. Brennan's view from behind, his hand on her shoulder with more force than necessary. Chen's camera captured Kendra's profile, her jaw set, refusing to look at co-workers who had stopped to stare. Rodriguez's camera showed the growing crowd, some pulling out phones to record. Mitchell's camera brought up the rear, capturing the full scene. 4 federal agents in tactical gear escorting a handcuffed nurse across the parking lot of her own workplace in broad daylight. "Kendra," a voice called out. Dr. Sarah Mendez, an attending physician, had just arrived for her shift. Her face was confusion and horror. "What's happening?" "They're arresting me," Kendra called back, her voice breaking. "They think I'm undocumented." "She's American," Mendez shouted, starting forward. "She was born here! This is insane!" Mitchell stepped into her path, hand raised. "Ma'am, step back. This is federal business." "Federal business?" Mendez's voice rose. "She's one of our best nurses. This is illegal." "Ma'am, final warning." Mendez stopped, hands raised, face flushed with anger and helplessness, all captured on camera. Another witness who saw injustice and was powerless to stop it. This is when Kendra made a choice that would change everything. She stayed silent, didn't resist, didn't scream, didn't give them any excuse to escalate because she understood something that Brennan didn't. 4 body cameras were recording everything, every illegal step, every violation, every moment of her fear and their aggression. Evidence, in high definition, from multiple angles, in perfect daylight. She would need it all. The van's back door opened. Brennan pushed her head down, guiding her into the seat. Rodriguez's camera captured Kendra's face one more time before the door closed. Fear, rage, disbelief, all illuminated by morning sun. The drive to the detention facility took 40 minutes. Brennan in the driver's seat, camera facing forward. Rodriguez in the passenger seat, camera angled back toward Kendra. She sat in silence, hands cuffed behind her, pressed against cold metal. "You comfortable back there?" Brennan asked, tone sarcastic. "No," she said quietly. "I'm in handcuffs despite being an American citizen who committed no crime." Rodriguez wanted to say something. His camera recorded his hand moving toward the radio, then stopping. The words wouldn't come. At the detention facility, all 4 cameras captured the intake process. The concrete building with high fences and razor wire, the fluorescent lighting, the echo of footsteps on linoleum. Officer Davis, the intake officer, looked tired. 50-something with a nameplate and resignation in her eyes. Brennan removed Kendra's handcuffs. The release revealed deep red marks on her wrists. Chen's camera zoomed in. Clear evidence. "Name," Davis said, fingers over keyboard. "Kendra Williams." Date of birth, March 15th, 1990. Place of birth, Detroit, Michigan. Davis's fingers paused. She looked up. "You were born in Detroit?" "Yes," Kendra said firmly. "I'm an American citizen. I've told these agents repeatedly. They arrested me anyway." Davis looked at Brennan, a question in her expression. "She could be lying," Brennan said. "Using a stolen identity. We need to run a full background check." "I'm not lying," Kendra said, leaning forward. "I'm a registered nurse at Detroit Memorial Hospital. I've worked there for 6 years. My nursing license number is RN471893. Look it up. Call the hospital. Call the Michigan Board of Nursing. Everything will verify." Davis's expression shifted. She typed, searched databases. Her eyes widened. What she found next would destroy Brennan's defense. "She's in the system," Davis said slowly. "Born in Detroit. Valid Social Security number issued in 1990. No immigration holds. No warrants. Nothing." Brennan stepped closer. "That doesn't prove anything. Run a deeper check." "I already did," Davis replied, voice tight. She turned to face him directly. "She's a licensed RN in Michigan. Active status. No disciplinary actions. She's been paying taxes at the same address for 6 years. She has a valid U.S. passport renewed 18 months ago." Silence. Heavy. Captured on 4 cameras. Only the hum of fluorescent lights and distant voices. Rodriguez spoke first, uncertain. "So she's telling the truth?" "Appears so," Davis said coldly. She stared at Brennan. "You arrested an American citizen." Brennan's face flushed red. "We had a tip. We had reasonable suspicion." "Based on what?" Davis demanded. The question hung there. 4 cameras recording. And Brennan had no answer. 10 full seconds of silence. Every moment documented. "I want my phone call," Kendra said, breaking it. "Now." Her mother answered on the second ring. "Mom?" Kendra's voice cracked, composure shattering. "I've been arrested. ICE arrested me. I'm at a detention facility." Her mother's scream was so loud it registered on both nearby cameras. "What? Baby, what are you talking about? You're American." "I know, Mom. I told them. I showed them my ID. They didn't care. I need you to call a lawyer. Get someone down here, please." Her mother was crying, but her voice steadied. Parent mode. "I'm calling right now. Don't say anything else. Don't answer questions. We're getting you out. Do you hear me?" "I hear you," Kendra whispered. Outside, wheels turned. Kendra's mother called her son Marcus Jr., who worked as a paralegal at a civil rights firm. Marcus listened with growing fury, then called his boss immediately. Attorney Daniel Reeves, veteran civil rights lawyer, 20 years of experience, reputation for taking impossible cases. He listened to Marcus's recounting, asked 3 pointed questions, then said, "I'm taking this case. Get me everything. Birth certificate, nursing license, employment records, passport, everything proving she's a citizen. I'm heading there now." At 12:18 p.m., 5 hours after Kendra's arrest, Daniel Reeves arrived at the detention facility. Tall, 50s, gray hair, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a leather briefcase that he set down with deliberate force. "I'm Daniel Reeves, attorney for Kendra Williams. I'm here to secure her immediate release." Davis looked relieved. "I'll get the supervisor." Supervisor Patricia Sanchez arrived within minutes. All 4 agents were called to the front office. Their body cameras captured the meeting from multiple angles. Reeves opened his briefcase. He began laying documents on the desk one by one, each paper placed with precision. Kendra Williams was born in Detroit on March 15, 1990. Here's her birth certificate, certified copy with raised seal. Brennan's hands clenched. "She's a licensed registered nurse in Michigan. Here's her license, active and current." Rodriguez shuffled nervously. "She's employed at Detroit Memorial Hospital for 6 years. Here's her employment verification, tax returns for 6 years, and a letter from the hospital administrator confirming citizenship and employment." Chen covered her mouth. "She has a valid U.S. passport. Here it is, issued by the U.S. Department of State, valid until 2028. Mitchell captured the passport as Reeves held it up, the gold eagle emblem clear. Reeves looked at each agent in turn, his gaze captured on all 4 cameras. "Now," he said quietly, with absolute authority, "explain to me how your agents determined she was undocumented." Silence. Deafening. Captured on all 4 audio feeds. Sanchez turned to Brennan. "Agent Brennan, what evidence did you have?" Brennan's camera recorded his view of the floor. "We received a tip about undocumented workers at the hospital. She matched the description." What description? Reeves demanded, stepping closer. The anonymous tip didn't include names, didn't include specific descriptions, didn't include identifying information. So tell me, Agent Brennan, what exactly did Ms. Williams match? The answer hung unspoken, obvious to everyone, preserved on 4 recordings. She matched Brennan's racist assumptions about who looked undocumented. She's black, Reeves said flatly. That's the only description she matched. You saw a black woman in a parking lot and decided she must be illegal. That's called racial profiling, Agent Brennan. And it's illegal. Brennan's hands trembled, his face pale, sweating. Release her immediately, Sanchez said, voice tight with fury. Kendra was brought out at 12:47 p.m., 5.5 hours after arrest. All 4 cameras captured her emergence. Scrubs wrinkled, eyes red, wrists bruised. Reeves moved toward her. She collapsed against him, body shaking. They had no right, she said, words muffled. I told them. I showed them everything. They didn't care. I know, Reeves said quietly, hand on her back, and they're going to answer for it. Before leaving, Reeves turned to Sanchez. I want copies of all body camera footage from this incident, all 4 agents, full recordings from activation until now. Sanchez nodded slowly. That's your right under FOIA. We'll process the request. I don't want it processed, Reeves replied, voice hardening. I want it preserved as evidence right now, before anything has a chance to be lost or corrupted. His implication was clear. Brennan's camera recorded his sharp intake of breath. I'll secure the footage personally, Sanchez said. You'll have copies within 48 hours. The footage was preserved that afternoon. 4 body cameras, nearly 6 hours of recording, multiple angles, timestamps, metadata, everything proving authenticity. 3 weeks later, the lawsuit was filed. Kendra Williams versus United States Department of Homeland Security, Marcus Brennan, Tyler Rodriguez, Jennifer Chen, David Mitchell, and Patricia Sanchez. Charges: false arrest, illegal detention, violation of civil rights under 4th and 14th Amendments, racial profiling, intentional infliction of emotional distress, deprivation of rights under color of law. The evidence was unprecedented. 4 body cameras providing different angles of the same incident. Every word on multiple audio feeds. Every movement, gesture, moment of fear and aggression documented in high definition. Much of it in perfect daylight. Reeves had handled hundreds of civil rights cases. But he'd never had evidence this comprehensive. You're not going to have to take anyone's word for what happened, he told the jury in his opening statement. You're going to see it from 4 different perspectives in broad daylight with perfect video quality. You're going to hear every word. And when you do, you're going to understand that this wasn't a mistake. This was racial profiling. Pure and simple, executed by federal agents who believed their badges made them untouchable. Dior, the federal government tried to settle early. $200,000 and a formal apology. Reeves refused. They came back with $500,000, refused. $1 million, refused. This isn't about money, Reeves told Kendra during a strategy session. This is about accountability, about making sure every ICE agent in this country knows they can't treat citizens like criminals based on skin color. The truth they tried to bury was about to surface. The case went to trial 16 months after Kendra's arrest. The courtroom packed every day. Media filled back rows. Civil rights advocates and community members lined up hours before doors opened. The body camera footage was the centerpiece. On the trial's 3rd day, all 4 recordings played simultaneously on 4 large screens positioned around the courtroom. The jury watched in absolute silence. They saw Brennan's dismissive gesture when Kendra showed her hospital ID. Captured on his own camera in bright daylight. They saw Rodriguez's uncomfortable shifting, visible on Chen's camera. They saw Mitchell stepping back, distancing himself, recorded on his own footage. They saw Kendra's fear, her tears, her bruised wrists, captured from every angle in crystal-clear video. The audio was devastating, played through the courtroom sound system, every word crystal clear. Brennan's threat. "We can do this the hard way." Kendra's desperate assertion. "I'm an American citizen." The click of handcuffs. The suppressed sobs during the drive. When the footage ended, the courtroom remained silent for 30 seconds. Several jurors were crying. Kendra testified for 4 hours, walking the jury through every moment of that morning. The exhaustion after her overnight shift. The terror seeing agents approach in bright morning light. The humiliation of handcuffs in front of colleagues in broad daylight with dozens of witnesses. The cold fear of detention. Her voice shook, but she didn't break. She wanted the jury to understand not just what happened, but what it felt like to be treated like a criminal in your own country. Have you ever been profiled? Drop your experience in the comments. Brennan's testimony was catastrophic. Under cross-examination, Reeves systematically dismantled every justification. "You said you had reasonable suspicion. What was it?" "The anonymous tip." "The tip mentioned the hospital but didn't mention Ms. Williams by name, did it?" "No." "It didn't provide a description of any specific individual?" "No." "So, what made you approach Ms. Williams specifically?" Silence. "Agent Brennan, I'll ask again. What made you single out Ms. Williams from all the people leaving that hospital?" "She matched a profile." "What profile?" More silence. "Agent Brennan, the body camera footage shows dozens of people leaving that hospital during your operation. People of various races, ages, genders, but you only stopped Ms. Williams. Why?" Brennan's voice was barely audible. "I thought she looked suspicious." "Looked suspicious? How? Be specific." I don't know. It was instinct." "Instinct based on what? Her race?" "No." "Then what? Her scrubs? Her hospital ID? The fact she was walking to her car? What about Ms. Williams was suspicious?" Brennan had no answer. What happened next shocked the courtroom. The prosecution called expert witnesses explaining how implicit bias affects law enforcement decisions, how racial profiling operates, how the Fourth Amendment protects citizens from unreasonable search and seizure. The defense tried arguing that ICE agents operate under difficult circumstances and sometimes make honest mistakes. Reeves destroyed that argument in his closing. "Honest mistakes are forgiven," he told the jury. But this wasn't an honest mistake. Agent Brennan saw a black woman and assumed she was undocumented. He ignored her hospital ID. He dismissed her assertion of citizenship. He arrested her without probable cause and detained her for hours despite having no evidence. That's not a mistake. That's racial profiling, and it violated Ms. Williams's constitutional rights. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. The damages phase took another week. They heard testimony about Kendra's emotional trauma, her nightmares, her fear of leaving her house, her inability to return to work at the hospital where she'd been arrested. They heard from her psychologist about her PTSD diagnosis. They heard from her mother about watching her daughter, a third-generation American, treated like a criminal. When the jury announced damages, the courtroom erupted. $8 million in compensatory damages for emotional distress, lost wages, medical expenses, and violation of constitutional rights. $6.8 million in punitive damages, specifically calculated to send a message to ICE and other federal agencies. Total, $14.8 million. Kendra broke down crying, surrounded by family. Reeves stood quietly, watching the jury. These 12 ordinary citizens who looked at evidence and decided racial profiling would not be tolerated even when committed by federal agents. This is when justice finally arrived. Brennan was terminated within hours of the verdict. Rodriguez, Chen, and Mitchell were suspended pending review. Rodriguez eventually resigned, unable to continue in law enforcement after being part of such a visible civil rights violation. Chen and Mitchell were reassigned to desk positions, their field careers effectively over. The Department of Homeland Security announced comprehensive reforms: mandatory implicit bias training for all ICE agents, stricter protocols requiring citizenship verification before any arrest, independent review of all immigration detentions, new policy requiring body camera footage preserved for minimum 5 years, in any case involving disputed arrest. But here's what the headlines didn't tell you. Kendra used part of her settlement to establish the Williams Civil Rights Legal Fund, providing free legal representation to others wrongfully detained by immigration authorities. She became a powerful advocate for reform. Testifying before Congress, speaking at universities, sharing her story with anyone who would listen. The body camera footage became a teaching tool in law schools and police academies, a stark example of how racial bias leads to civil rights violations and how technology provides irrefutable evidence of misconduct. And in ICE offices across the country, the case of Kendra Williams became legend. A cautionary tale about consequences of racial profiling told in training sessions and whispered in hallways. A reminder that body cameras cut both ways, protecting good agents but exposing those who abuse authority. 4 cameras, 4 perspectives, one undeniable truth. But let me tell you what really happened here. What the verdict didn't say, what the reforms couldn't address. Kendra Williams wasn't an outlier. She was a pattern. After her case went public, dozens of others came forward. Black citizens detained and questioned, Latino families separated at checkpoints, Asian Americans asked to prove their documentation despite being born here. All of them had one thing in common. They looked different from what agents like Brennan considered American. The ICE Detroit field office had been operating like this for years. Anonymous tips used as justification without verification. Racial profiling disguised as law enforcement. Federal authority wielded as a weapon against the very citizens it was supposed to protect. Brennan wasn't a bad apple. He was a product of a system that rewarded aggression, praised arrest numbers, and protected agents who violated rights. His supervisors knew. They had 3 formal complaints in his file. They called him aggressive but effective and gave him commendations. They valued his statistics over the constitutional rights of the people he was supposed to serve. That's not individual racism. That's institutional racism. And it didn't start with Brennan. It won't end with his termination. Because here's the truth they don't want you to know. For every Kendra Williams with body camera footage and a skilled attorney, there are dozens without. People detained and deported before they can prove citizenship. Families separated without documentation. Lives destroyed without witnesses. The only reason Kendra won was because 4 cameras captured everything in perfect daylight. Because her brother worked at a civil rights firm. Because Attorney Reeves took her case. Because the evidence was so overwhelming that even a system designed to protect federal agents couldn't ignore it. But what about everyone else? What about the people who don't have body cameras recording their detention? What about the people who can't afford Daniel Reeves? What about the people whose cases never make headlines, whose verdicts never reach $14.8 million, whose reforms never change policy? They're still out there. Still being profiled, still being detained, still being treated like criminals in their own country. And that's why this story matters. Not because one nurse won one case, but because her victory exposed a pattern, revealed a system, proved that racial profiling isn't just wrong, it's expensive, documented, and prosecutable. Kendra didn't just win justice for herself. She won evidence that the system works the way we've been saying it works. That implicit bias is real, that federal agents are not immune from accountability, that body cameras can expose what institutions try to hide. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been stopped and asked to prove you belong somewhere? Have you ever been questioned about your citizenship despite being born here? Have you ever watched someone with authority look at your skin and make assumptions about your status? Have you ever felt the terror of knowing that protesting your innocence might make things worse? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're not alone. And if you answered no, I want you to think about why that is. Because the difference between Kendra Williams and millions of other Americans isn't behavior or documentation or citizenship. It's how we look. And in a country that claims to be post-racial, that claims to judge people by character rather than appearance, that claims to protect all citizens equally under the law, that difference shouldn't matter. But it does. Every single day. Kendra Williams's case proved it with 4 body cameras, 6 hours of footage, and $14.8 million in damages. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Share this story. Not the sanitized version that makes it about one bad agent. The real version that exposes systemic racial profiling protected by institutional power. Because Kendra Williams fought back and won. But she shouldn't have had to fight at all. No American citizen should be handcuffed in their workplace parking lot because a federal agent looked at their skin and decided they looked illegal. No one should have to prove their humanity, their citizenship, their right to exist in public spaces without harassment. No one should have to endure 5.5 hours of detention, months of trauma, years of litigation just to receive an apology and compensation for rights that should never have been violated in the first place. The system that allowed Marcus Brennan to arrest Kendra Williams is still operating. The reforms are good. The training is necessary. The policies matter. But until we address the fundamental assumption that some people look American and some people don't, until we confront the implicit bias that makes federal agents see black skin and think undocumented, until we hold institutions accountable for protecting agents who violate rights, this will keep happening. Kendra Williams won her case. But the fight for justice, for equality, for the right to be treated as a citizen in your own country without having to prove it every time you leave your house, that fight continues, and it needs all of us. Subscribe to channel for more stories of courage, resistance, and justice that the mainstream media won't tell you. Drop your story in the comments. Tell us about your experiences with profiling, with discrimination, with being made to feel like you don't belong in spaces where you have every right to be. Because these stories matter, your stories matter, and the more we share them, the harder it becomes for institutions to deny, to dismiss, to bury the truth. 4 cameras captured Kendra Williams's truth in perfect daylight. But there are millions of truths still in shadow. Bring them to light. Stay just, stay loud, stay free.